Good morning. This is Valerie Co. Welcome to my studio and my channel. I thought with Valentine's Day fast approaching, I would paint a card for my sweet husband. I put together this on Procreate, and if you have nice handwriting and a lot of time, you could hand letter. I don't have either one of those things, so I just use that program to do my lettering for me. And then what I do is I take a really soft pencil and trace it on the back, and then put it down on my watercolor paper and trace it. I don't like to draw directly on watercolor paper because if you erase, you can ruin the sizing, and it just puts a amount of pressure on me that I don't really want. I want to enjoy what I'm doing, so I hash out my ideas on scratch paper or inexpensive paper, and then I put it on the watercolor paper. I've taped this off, and when you tape off, you want to make sure you use a burnishing tool. Even in the end of a brush will work, but you want to work around the edges of the tape, and where the tape meets, you really want to make sure that you get in there, because otherwise paint can run under that. And if you're wanting to have a nice clean edge, you need to make sure that you burnish around the edges. So what I've done is mixed up some turquoise. I want to make my letters in turquoise color, and I've used ultramarine blue, a phthalo blue, and then a phthalo green light. So hopefully this will look good with the red. And I'm just going to start by painting in my letters, and I might do the lines in the same color. I haven't decided whether I'm going to mask it off or if I'm going to be brave and try to paint around it. We'll kind of see how this goes. I love the way that ultramarine granulates. When it dries, it has this really interesting granular, grainy looking, sandy looking texture to it, which I really like. Depending on your lettering that you decide to do, you don't have to be so perfect. This is a number 6 round that I'm using. It gives me a little bit of control and yet holds a good amount of paint, so I don't tend to noodle too much. The one thing to remember about watercolor also is if it looks right when you put it down, it's not going to be right, because as far as the value, the lightness and the darkness of it, watercolor tends to dry about 25% later than it appears when it's wet. So I like the color of this, and I think when it dries, it's going to be just exactly what I was looking for. I think I'll have leave the letters pretty much a flat color, and then maybe I'll introduce a little bit more interest in cooler and warmer variations of this color when I get into doing the lines. But I think for the letters, I'll leave them one color and not vary it. That's the fun thing about watercolor, is it's super easy to introduce other colors into it and add interest. It's a lot easier mixing than it is, say, with acrylic or oil. using your watercolor brush to get into the lines, you can use the tip, but then you can drag your brush along, and that way it puts out more paint. Not that speed is what we're looking for necessarily, but you don't want to noodle around too much. You want to keep things moving so that it doesn't dry out and you don't get blooms. Sometimes blooms are really fun. They're happy accidents. That's the thing that's a lot of fun about watercolor also, is you do have a lot of happy accidents that happen and things that you couldn't predict, but that are really pretty and interesting. Jaggedy edge there, so I'll try to clean that up a little bit. Not gonna worry about it too much. Okay. So I really like that starting to dry. I like that color. I might introduce just a little bit more green to some of it, just to change it up a little bit. Green being the complement of red, and since this is going to be a Valentine's card, not that I want it to look like Christmas, that's why I'm trying to keep it a little bit more on the blue side. I wanted to use the blue areas to do separations for the red. And if it bleeds into my color, I don't care. It's probably going to create some blooms, but I think that might be fun to have some of those things happen. So I think I might press down and draw up just to try to create something that's a little bit more interesting than just a flat straight line. Trying not to be too perfect about it, too fussy. About to get my hand in wet paint. So if I don't like that, I can always just drag back into it. That's the thing about watercolor, you can glaze back over things if you're worried about too much of a bloom. And I think that's still going to bloom, but I think it's going to be pretty, but I wanted to even it up a little bit more. You're always learning something with watercolor. What to do, what not to do. The main thing is just to have fun. Just play around with it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and let that dry, and then I'm gonna decide whether I'm gonna try to mask it off or whether I'm gonna try to paint around it. Decide on that. We'll see. When I let my watercolor dry, I like to let it dry naturally. I live in the high mountain desert, so that usually happens pretty quickly. If you're in a hurry, you can use a hairdryer, but if you use a hairdryer that has heat, it will tend to deaden and dull your pigments. So if you can buy a blow dryer that has a air only setting, that's the best way to do it, and that way it doesn't dull the pigments. So I'll see you after this dries. So I decided I would just work around painting around the shapes. So we'll just play around with that. Mixed up different reds. This particular palette has, I think, 4 different reds. I'm just using them straight. I don't usually use pigments straight, usually mix it with something. But I thought, it'd just be fun to see what we get. Introduce a little purple in there, just to give it a little bit different look. I think I'll variegate this just to make it a little more interesting. It's a big area. I even put a little orange in there. That orange against the turquoisey blue. Let's see. Go for a little bit more of this alizarin. Okay, that was a fun passage. So I'm super happy with the way the watercolor turned out. To me, it almost looks like a stained glass, but I think it needs something. So I think what I'm gonna do is take this Faber-Castell, who knows if I'm pronouncing that properly. It's a gold pen, and I think I'm just gonna go around and outline all of this. If you're wondering what colors I was using, what paints, well, that's the brand. It's French. I know I won't pronounce it properly, so I'm not even gonna try. I like those paints. I also use M. Graham quite a bit. I like them because they use honey as a binder, and I live in the high mountain desert, and our air is super dry, so the honey helps it stay moist longer. So, okay, I'm gonna just give this a try, see what happens. Kind of softens the edges. Hopefully I don't run out. It's acting like it's wanting to run out. Yeah, I like that a lot better. Now I'll go ahead and do all the lines. Does seem to be running out, and unfortunately I don't have another one of these, so we'll see if we can limp along. Oh, I'm glad I got the letters done before this started dying on me. Yikes. Seems like if I tap at it, it'll give me a little more. Might make it. Limping along here. Okay, whoops, missed the center there. Really tell a difference. Oh, that's better. Oops, I think I missed that one completely. Okay. All right, well, it would have been a little easier if my pen hadn't died, but just go with the non-flow, I guess. Okay, so now the fun part, when you take the tape off. When you take the tape off, you want to kind of do it at an angle. And just go slow. Tear up some of the paper on that one. In the corner. Okay. Here's my Valentine card. I'll just cut it out of this watercolor book that I made and use that. So anyway, If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the section, and I hope you'll subscribe, and hope to see you in the next video. Happy painting!